Today we're on a road trip. Woo! Going to North Yorkshire. Can't wait for this one. Something different, something special. Stay tuned. Today we're doing something different to what we normally do, and we're going to do a battlefield walk. Imagine, amidst a heavy snowfall, spring came late, so there was blizzards and all types of bad weather. The date is the 29th of March 1461. On these fields that we're walking around, and we're going to be showing you some sights. We're not historians.
Not by far.
No way by far, so don't think we are historians. So some of our information is what we're getting off these notice boards and little bits that we've seen on YouTube prior to this trip. So two mass armies gathered on this field, approximately 60,000 men. On one side was the Yorkists, and on the other side were the Lancastrians. So this is quite early in the War of the Roses. Now, today is a lovely sunny day, and we're getting close to the anniversary of the Battle of Towton. So that's where we are today. These fields are the battlefields of Towton. 29th of March 1461.
So, the far end where the brown fields are, you can just see the towers of this power station. That is where the Yorkists came from. The Lancastrians where this green field is about now. So that was the line of attack. There was very hand-to-hand combat, and Lancastrians had superior numbers, pushed the Yorkist army back up the hill towards Saxton. The Yorkist line may also have been outflanked at its left end. Some accounts report Lancastrian ambush from Castle Hill Wood, far from the main action, although this is maybe an excuse given by the eventual victors for their temporary setback. Hi, so we're talking about weapons here. There were quite a few swords, longbows obviously. The archers cut down quite a lot of people. Then there was the axe with the spike on the top, the pole axe, which is a very effective weapon. Also the horseman's hammer, which was like a big sledgehammer with a spike on the far end, so they could either smash skulls or whatever, you know, use the spike to get them. Still find arrowheads, although metal detecting is not really allowed around here. But yes, so the longbow, swords, mace and types of things like that were used in this battle. Very bloody and horrible death, I would imagine.
Just getting back onto the weapons that Phil's just been talking about. Reputedly 60,000 men fought on this battle. Now sometimes obviously numbers are exaggerated, we'll never know. But the figures say 28,000 people died on this battlefield that morning, that day of the 29th of March 1461. Some say it was closer to 13,000. More of a possibility, realistic figure would have been about 13,000. But the historical facts and books and everything say about 28,000. So you imagine, snowy day, bloodshed. This is reputedly the bloodiest battle ever fought on English soil. Now that's some horrible butchery. Really is. The field must have been covered in blood, bodies. Horrible to think in today that used to happen years and years and years ago. But 28,000 reputably dead on these fields. That's a mass murder, isn't it, really? A butchery of unprecedented type. Like Phil says, with the weapons that they was using, they did excavations on these fields and they found a mass grave. The skulls, I don't want to go into too much detail, but the skulls was not in a good state. The bones, there was chip marks out of them. It must have been horrendous. It must have been absolutely horrendous. On that day, the Yorkist army was pushing the Lancastrians over this ridgeline and into this field, which is now called Bloody Meadow. Well, it's part of it anyway. Round about this area here, the Lancastrian army broke and lost and fled down here, which is now called Bloody Meadow. This is where most of the butchery happened on that day of 29th of March 1461. Down at the bottom is Cockbeck, and it's reputed or reported that there was mass dead bodies around the bottom of there over the river, and you could walk or climb across to get to the other side on the carcasses of the Lancastrian dead. This is on the battlefield, is where most of the dead happened, and the butchery happened on that day in 1461. Carnage.
So you can imagine ice, snow, blizzards, freezing temperatures, and the majority of them were wearing what they call jacks, which are quilted jackets with metal plates sewn into them, especially the archers. The knights, full body armour, which would be heavy, slippery conditions, freezing cold. So you can imagine quite a few died from exposure, as well as the arrows and other weapons. Yep, so it wasn't a very, very good place to be, despite the weapons and the fighting. The temperature and what they were wearing added to the problems.
Right, we've come to a significant part of the Battle of Towton. Down in the bottom there was an old bridge called the Bridge of Bodies. Now it was the only bridge that was across the Cockbeck at that time. Now I don't know if there's any more bridges across it, I ain't got a clue. But that was the only bridge that quite a few of the Lancastrians who managed to get across that bridge survived the Yorkist pursuit. But obviously you can see at the bottom it's quite swampy, so lots of the Lancastrians also died in this location as well. They was trying to reach what was then called the Old London Road, which is within that tree line at the bottom that runs from York to London. It's more like a dirt track these days, but that was the Old London Road and the main road that led from north to south in these parts. Now quite a few down there, trying to cross the bridge, which is called the Bridge of Bodies. Tadcaster Brewery in the distance. Nice pint to John Smith's after a big hard day's fought battle. Can't beat a pint to John Smith's. The battlefield at Towton. Very bleak, very open. So we're not far off the actual village of Towton now, which is in the distance, a couple of minutes away when we get there. I'm just going to say something that a lot of people a lot of historians seem to not recognise. I'm not an historian, never have been. I do love history, same with Phil. But I'm going to say my opinion on this. The English Civil War was in the 1500s, so 16th century. But really, that was the second Civil War. I'm going to be very posh, I'm going to say war. It was the second Civil War, and because the War of the Roses really was a civil war, weren't it? Well, don't you think? Because it was family against family, brother against brother, cousin against cousin, fighting, one for the House of Lancaster and one for the House of York. Now, a lot of people also get this wrong. It wasn't about two counties, Lancashire and Yorkshire. It wasn't about that. It was about two royal houses, the House of York and the House of Lancaster. Most of the Yorkist support came from the south. Most of the Lancastrian support came from the north of England. So it definitely weren't about Yorkshire and Lancashire.
North and south.
It was north and south, really. And about two kings. We had two kings at that point. Richard Duke of York proclaimed himself King of England. We'd already got a king on the throne at that time, which was the House of Lancaster, or was controlled by the House of Lancaster, really. Which was Henry, I believe. I'm not sure if it was Henry the VI, I could be wrong. But like I said, I'm not an historian. He was the son of the Henry V anyway, so. We're just going to be approaching Towton, which is the little village there in the distance. Another notice board, so let's see what this has got to say. That's my wee rant over for that one anyway.
Well, here we are at Towton. At the time of the battle, over here was the medieval strip fields. So each part had a strip of field with space to grow whatever. Over there was the Towton Hall and Chapel Garth. And about that direction there was where the old medieval house platforms were. And then there's, by the tree over there was the Chapel Hill. Obviously a chapel on there at some stage. Now they did some excavations around here and found a mass grave with at least 38 individuals in there that have been stripped and then buried. All those skeletons were taken away and analysed, and it's formed part of a book that the injuries and things were described in that. So this is Towton.
the village of Towton. The new part of it anyway.
Very nice.
Lovely. Very nice. So, we're at the far side of the battlefield now. I think most of the fighting took place further over that direction. We're not a million miles back to the start of the trail. So it's not as far as it said it was going to be, but that's fine. Been a lot of history, a lot to talk about. Imagine 60,000 people on this battlefield, and it was only approximately a mile across. That's a lot of people in a contained area. They wouldn't really have much time to move, much place to move really, to be fair. Now, something else. Think back to medieval times when the population of the country was just over 1 million, so it was 1 point something million people. You've got 60,000 people fighting on this one battle.
That's a lot of people out of such a small population, really.
Take the women and children away from that 1 point something million figure, and you've got nearly the entire male population here at Towton on that day. They were fighting on that day. There wouldn't have been many that weren't here. The villages and towns must have been deserted.
Yeah.
Apart from women and children and the elderly that couldn't fight. That's a sobering thought.
It is. It is.
Very sobering thought. So, we're here at the battle lines on the very, very start of the Battle of Towton in 1461. Right where we're standing, from this point across the field here, was the Yorkist line. And round about, let me zoom the camera around for you, where that dark brown patch of land is, across there, was the front line of the Yorkists. Now on top of the hill, on the brow of the hill there, was where the Lancastrian line is. Right across the top, that's where the Lancastrian army was set, facing south. We're facing north at the moment. Now, that's where that little tree is at the top, was the Duke of Somerset. About midway were the Duke of Exeter, and then at the end of the battlefield over there, just before it drops down, was the Earl of Northumberland. Now where we're standing,
Yep, is Lord Falkenberg. Then midway is Edward IV, and at the far side is Sir John Wenlock for the Earl of Warwick.
yeah, so you've got quite a substantial noblemen on this battlefield on that day, especially the Duke of York, who had himself made King Edward IV. I believe it was Henry V's son. I could be wrong on that one. Or it was his dad, one or the other. I can't quite remember. I think probably his dad.
There is an interesting fact as well. In front of the lines there was a 250 metre archery range. and the wind was blowing in the right direction for the Yorkies. So as they marched forward, they even picked up the arrows that were falling short of the opposite side and fired them back at them.
Yeah, I've heard that story. I'll show you, I'll pan it around to show you what actually was. Now, where that row of trees is, just at the other side, you got a field that runs across where that car's going, at the other side of it, that runs up there. That was where the archers was. Now, because the Yorkies was firing in, not what do you call it, towards the wind. No, they got the wind at the back.
With the wind, yeah.
With the wind. They got the wind at the back. Like Phil's just explained to you, there was firing and there was hitting substantial amount of the Lancastrian troops. But when the Lancastrians returned fire, their arrows fell short because they was firing into the wind. And like Phil's just said, when they used all their own arrows, they went forward, picked up the Lancastrian arrows that fell short and fired them back into the ranks of the Lancastrians. So, first few minutes or whatever of the Battle of Towton, quite bloody to say.
Yep.
Quite bloody.
Yeah.
And you imagine it being snowing as well, quite heavily, which took them both by surprise on the morning of the 29th of March 1461, Palm Sunday, which I'm very surprised that they actually decided to fight on that day.
Yep.
Being religion and faith being quite strong, they didn't usually fight on Sundays. Day of rest and all that. Now this is on the far left of the Yorkist lines. This is the field where the archers was. Now there was firing actually uphill towards the Lancastrian lines. So the wind must be quite strong facing from south to north for them to take their arrows up. But I don't think once you fire your arrows into the air, which if it's uphill or not doesn't really make a difference, does it? As long as you've got the wind at your back. Down there at the far end, where it drops down into that ravine, it's the start of the bloody meadow where the Lancastrians tried to flee, and the biggest part of the butchery and the carnage and the slaughter on that day took place.
Right, so over in the distance we have power station at Ferrybridge, which is where the Yorkists marched from. All the way up here and set up on the battlefield.
The Lancastrian army came from York. Very strange, doesn't it? Sounds like, why does a Lancastrian army march out of York? But yeah, that's where there was garrisoned at York. The king at the time, the Lancastrian king, was with his wife, was actually still at York Castle. But they marched from that sort of direction south, and like Phil's just explained, met the army here at Towton, where they marched to Ferrybridge from the south. And this is where they met on that fateful day. Right, we're actually practically in the centre of the battlefield here at Towton, or Towton as some people call it.
Yeah.
This is Dacre's Cross, sometimes known as Towton Cross. Engraved into it says Battle of Towton, Palm Sunday. On the other side it says Towton 1461. Good end this battlefield tour here. It's been quite nice, it's been a nice walk.
It is, yeah.
I hope, like I said before when we first started, we're not historians. It's just information we've picked up off the boards and little bits that we've already picked up off YouTube and things like that before we came to this location. So forgive us if we've got some of the information wrong, because if we've got it wrong, they've got it wrong.
Yeah.
So because that's the information we've got it from. So thank you for watching. We're going to cut it here. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to our videos. We don't usually do these sort of videos of battlefields and things, but some will be able to get out and do proper treks, and this, but we do like to incorporate some history
Now and again.
into our trails if there is any. So like I said, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. Please share our videos on all social media sites. And from the Battle of Towton in the year 2022, from here, from 1461, J out.
Fill out.
Till next
trekking.
time. Trek on.